humanist perspective presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Hello again, folks. Thanks for being with us. I'm Harry Greenberger, host for this show, and my guest today, who has been a guest on this show previously, is Lloyd Harsch. And I have to read your credentials because I can't remember them all. He's a professor of church history and Baptist studies, director of the Institute for Faith and Public Square, occupying the cooperative program chair for SBC, that's Southern Baptist Convention Studies, for the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. You've got a lot of jobs to do, don't you?
We're quite busy.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about religious liberty. However, before we do that, let me just restate the position of our secular group regarding religious liberty, which is dependent upon the First Amendment to the Constitution,
right?
Which says it guarantees the freedom of religion, a concept which was so ill-defined that it, for 200 years, has seen court cases. What did the writers of the Constitution mean by freedom of religion, which was, I think, settled by the Supreme Court when they said, well, that clause means at least this, that government should stay out of religion and religion should stay out of government, and that there would be a wall of separation between them. That's what we know and what we think about religious liberty. But at the Baptist Theological Seminary, you just completed an event which was called Baptist Voices on Religious Liberty, Left, Right, and Center. I don't know what that encompasses, and so I'm going to let you tell us who participated in the event and then what it was all about.
Well, thank you, Harry. And I appreciate the opportunity of being invited back again. I enjoy coming in, and I enjoy our dialogues together. We've been at a number of our conferences, and it's exciting to do that. The conference we had was to bring together a wide variety of people from across the globe to express and define their understanding of religious liberty. We had William Brackney, who is from Acadia College up in Canada, in Nova Scotia. If we have our Cajuns in the south, they came from Acadia, which was the eastern part of Canada over 200 years ago. And so he brought a Canadian perspective. We had Dr. Michael Edens from the faculty at New Orleans Baptist Seminary. He lived in the Middle East for over a quarter of a century. And so he brought a perspective of what religious liberty feels like and sounds like from the Middle East. We had Russell Moore, who is the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission president from the Southern Baptist Convention. He's one of the lobbyists on behalf of Southern Baptists in Washington for religious liberty issues. We also had J. Brent Walker, who is executive director of the Baptist Joint Committee on Religious Liberty, who represents the rest of Baptists in America. So they often disagree with how you apply religious liberty in regarding various laws and applications. We had Dr. Susie Painter, the executive director of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. And we had Dr. Kenneth McDowell from here in New Orleans. He's a professor at Union Baptist College and Seminary. Our plenary speaker was Dr. Grigory Komandant from Ukraine. He helped set up seminaries under the Soviets, so he worked when being a man of faith was very inconvenient and often illegal. His grandfather was arrested and died in prison for allowing a prayer group to meet in his house. And so he brings a wealth of backgrounds, particularly with the growing tensions between Ukraine and Russia. So those were the speakers that we had. We had a question and answer period time afterwards. If you have an interest in observing the conference, it's free and online. Go to faith-publicsquare.org and go to events and then past events, and you can see the links to the conference there.
And you're going to give us a condensed version of what they might see if they watch the whole conference.
Yes.
Today. Now, let me, before I ask you to, and I assume that among those speakers, they were not all in agreement.
No, they were not.
All right. Well, from your website, I have a couple of quotations from you.
Okay.
You said, "A challenge to religious liberty today is a fundamental shift in the public's understanding of what religious liberty means."
Yes.
And you said, "Religious liberty doesn't mean that I endorse someone else's beliefs, but I allow them the right to live according to their conscience. If truth is given a fair hearing, truth will win out." Mm-hmm. The final quote of yours I want to read says, "Religious liberty is not just for one group, but for all people, the atheists, mm-hmm. the Muslims, the Christians. If any of these have their rights of conscience violated by government dictate, any of them become suspect." What do you mean that they become suspect?
The rights of freedom become suspect. So if the rights of any group are being challenged and abused, then the rights of all are at risk.
Well, I'm glad that you included atheists in that group, because our rights are frequently violated. All right, now tell us what about right, left, and center religious liberty.
Well, religious liberty, as we have discussed earlier, is the ability to practice a person's faith. And where you highlighted one of the definitions there about being challenged and redefined, what I see happening now in the 21st century is what used to be defined as toleration is now accepted as being religious liberty. We will define religious liberty as that we will tolerate you to believe whatever you wish in your private home or behind the doors of your places of worship or wherever you are. But you cannot bring and act upon your religious convictions in the public square. That would be an undue establishment of religion. So what we want is a non-religious
under the
public
Constitution
square.
You were talking about.
Well, no.
Establishment.
If you plan to do so, if you want to act upon your religious convictions, then you will run into threat of persecution. Or prosecution. You will be marginalized. You will be forced out of the public square.
I don't understand that. In this country where we have freedom of religion, we have more religious sects and more churches than any country in the world. These people were not prevented from doing that.
No, they aren't. But what I'm hearing more and more now is, as court cases continue to become, working their way through the court system, that you're welcome to believe whatever you want, but once you enter the business world, you give up the right to practice your religious beliefs. You have to make them subservient to other guidelines, whatever is society now wants to say those guidelines come to be. And that is a violation of conscience, whether it's a religiously held position or a position of conscience only. In fact, the founders considered those terms interchangeable.
What, religion and
religious liberty and acts of conscience.
Right.
They consider that to be interchangeable.
Okay.
And so that to me is the greater challenge, is that you cannot actually live out your faith.
All right. Now, the people at your meeting who brought different viewpoints,
Yes.
did anything get resolved between some of them who originally did not agree with someone else?
They found sometimes that people who are usually on the opposite aisle of a question, that when they talked in theory or talked about here's how we understand the concept of religious liberty, that they were finding themselves more and more in agreement with people they had historically disagreed. Now, when it comes to a particular issue on the ground, they still may find themselves on opposite sides of how to apply the concept of religious liberty. But the concept that this is necessary and important was
All right. Well, your event was called Right, Left, and in between. Is this political right and political left, or you're just talking about two sides?
It was political right and left. It was theological right, left, and center. I did not identify the speakers as this is the person representing the left or this person is representing the right. I just got a diversity of speakers and allowed the individuals to speak for themselves and the audience to decide for themselves how they would understand the speaker.
Now, the ones who may have made their presentation, which appeared to be very conservative, which we would call the right, and someone else who may have appeared to be very liberal, which we would call the left, did those people find any common ground?
They did. And the common ground, and I believe that you will find this encouraging, was that with people with whom we disagree, we cannot come at people with whom we disagree with a hammer to say, because we find ourselves on opposite sides of an issue, that they are to be destroyed, they are to be marginalized, they are to be done away with. People with whom we disagree are people with whom we disagree. We still love them. We still are engage with them in friendly discussion. From a religious point of view, these are still individuals created in the image of God and have value because of that, if nothing else.
All right. Now, was your audience primarily, from your organization, or who made up that audience?
It was a diverse audience. We had some faculty, we had some students, we had some people from the community. It was just a variety of individuals who came.
And what kind of questions did they ask and get answered?
Actually, the question you had asked about how do you approach people with whom you disagree, and it was pointed directly at the two people who represent Baptists in Washington. It said, here is this issue. I know you guys disagree. How do you resolve this? And so I'll let them answer that if you want to go online and listen to their answers. It's more than what we'd have time.
You have Baptist people representing Baptists in Washington. You're talking about a lobby?
Yes.
What's the name of that lobby?
There's the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention. So if there are issues that affect people of faith or deal with areas that people of faith would have an interest, people in Washington usually want to know, well, what do Southern Baptists think about this issue? And that would be Russell Moore. J. Brent Walker represents the rest of the Baptist denominations that exist in the United States that want to have a voice in Washington.
And you're saying that there are different views among Baptist organizations?
Yes.
The Southern Baptist. In fact, isn't there more than one group of Southern Baptists?
There is one group of Southern Baptists, but Southern Baptists, over the years at times, different groups have left the Southern Baptist Convention to form their own groups because of disagreements on different issues.
I understand. So even among the same religion, there are different views related to what? Related to religious liberty, or related to what?
Well, as I'd mentioned before, on how to approach that and apply that. For instance, vouchers, school vouchers. One side will say they're a permissible aspect of the government should be if the government has an interest in an educated populace, how that populace is educated really should be of no interest to the government as long as it has an educated populace.
That is a position.
That was one of the positions. Therefore, if you have money in a voucher that's given to a parent and the parent decides how that's going to be used, that's a permissible use and it's not a violation of an establishment clause. The other side says any public money, regardless of how it's spent and regardless of to whom it helps, is a violation of the establishment clause and so is impermissible. In Louisiana, vouchers go to people, parents of children in failing schools. So it helps most often the most disadvantaged within our society. Rather than waiting for the school system to get fixed 20 years down the road, and we've lost another generation of largely minority, exclusively poor.
So they take these vouchers and they can use them in religious schools.
Or private schools, or any other type of education.
They could take a state of Louisiana voucher and go to a Catholic school.
They could, yes.
Which is taxpayers' money going into religion.
It's taxpayers' money going to a taxpayer who decides how that money is being used.
Well, there's a little
but you see, that's where the difference comes in.
Yes, there is a fine distinction.
Is government directing that money to a particular faith group, which I would find a violation. If government specifically said, this must go here, then that would be a violation.
But they said you can use it wherever you want.
Correct.
Now, back to your event, and
yes.
I know I've been to other events at your place, and usually at the end, all of your speakers do a summary or you have closing comments. What was said at the conclusion?
Well, the conclusion, the final speaker was Grigory Komandant. He's the man in Ukraine. And he's saying right now the challenges is dealing with brothers and sisters within the faith community who find themselves on different sides of a political issue.
He's talking about the Ukraine or the world?
With Ukraine.
Okay.
Because Russia, through its media, is saying it has no soldiers on the ground. It's not participating on a movement into eastern Ukraine. And if that's what you're hearing for the news, and it's an entirely justifiable reason why we're helping these people in eastern Ukraine throw off the shackles of oppression of the Ukrainian government, that's different than being in the Ukraine, saying we're being invaded by Russian tanks and Russian soldiers. And so continuing to work together, to have fellowship together, even though there's differences on what exactly is going on the ground.
How much religion is there in the Ukraine? Because when it was part of the USSR,
mm-hmm.
It was USSR when it was communist was also secular.
Correct.
How much religion redeveloped in the Ukraine? A lot?
Considerably. The Ukrainian Baptist Union is the largest Baptist union in all of Europe. There are more Baptists in Ukraine than there are in Great Britain. There are more Baptists in Ukraine than Russia or in Germany, even though the populations are different.
Well, part of that comes from the fact that all across Western Europe, people have left the churches, have left religion, and have become secular. I mean, major movement out of religion all across Western Germany.
Correct.
So, if in the Ukraine they're quite religious, it's not so surprising that it's more so than the same percentage in Western Europe.
But if you're coming from an entire generation and a half that said there is no religion and religious people are marginalized and there is no hope because religion is the opiate of the people, it's extremely surprising that people would embrace an aspect of faith as providing hope when you've not had any cultural or family background that says that this even has any value.
You've touched on what I always like to refer to, and that is that most people, and I'm talking about in this country, but it applies elsewhere, follow whatever religion their parents had. If you're born into a Catholic home, you're a Catholic. If you're born into a Baptist home, you're a Baptist. It's what you learn before you're 6 years old. In the Ukraine, where religion had been abolished, that same situation didn't prevail.
Did not.
It just, how do you explain it?
Well, you mentioned earlier one of the quotes there that if you put truth, if you have a situation where you have a competing worldviews and you let people have an honest opportunity to evaluate them, to me, that which has truth in it will prevail. And so I think that's what we're seeing in Ukraine.
Okay, and then it's just a matter of your truth versus my truth.
Exactly. I describe it this way when I've talked with our kids as they came up. My grandfather worked in the Homestake gold mine for 41 years. He worked underground, he set dynamite drifted shafts. But in the Black Hills, you can do a lot of panning for gold. And so when you pan for gold, you get that, you pick the pan up. There's a lot of gravel, a lot of garbage, a lot of just junk. And in the world today of ideas, there are a lot of just garbage ideas. They're flash in the pans. They're things that really don't hold a lot of water. And then you see a flash and it catches your eye, and you think, wow, this must be valuable. But is it real gold or is it fool's gold? Okay. And if you put fool's gold, which looks really good, next to real gold, all of a sudden it looks very inadequate. And so if people are going to give honest evaluations of worldviews, to me, I believe that that which has truth will stand out more brightly than that which does not.
Now, getting down to the difference between you and me and your organization and mine, and the question of what is truth, from your point of view, the existence of God is true.
Yes.
From our point of view, it is not.
Correct.
Now, we can agree that we have disagreed.
Correct.
There's no resolution to that, is there?
Agreeing that we disagree, in one sense, is a resolution.
It is, but is there another?
Well, I believe that we continue to talk with each other and present each other with, here's why I believe my position has validity, and you present why you believe your position has validity, and that if we come open-mindedly to that discussion, that we will have greater opportunities for increased dialogue. And for me, I believe the truth, or that the evidence, weighs more heavily towards the existence of God than not.
And you do not waver.
I've examined. I have wavered. Yes, I've examined. My dad was a pastor, and as I was growing up, we'd pass other churches, we would pass other organizations, and I wondered, if we are going to send missionaries across the world to give a message of hope, that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, maybe we're the ones who are wrong and we need to listen to their missionaries. And so during high school and college, I did an examination of different worldviews, different religions, different truth claims, and the conclusion of my examination was the only worldview that held together, both from documentary evidence, both from a logical point of view, both from an ethical point of view, and a variety, historically verifiable, was Christianity.
Well, I'm sure that you are aware from our past conversations that I don't necessarily agree with everything you just said. But what about half the world are Muslims? How does that fit into the picture of, who is God?
Well, that's part of that disagreement. Their understanding and definition of God would be different than mine. And so what my responsibility as a Christian would be to do is to engage the Muslim world with a discussion of who is God, what is the character of God, and I believe that the God that we see in the Bible is a truer representation of God than what we would see in the Quran.
Well, I don't know. I'm not a student of religion and certainly not of the Quran, but I read that the Quran says that the Muslims should destroy the Christians. Is that your understanding?
That is in the Quran, yes.
Well, how do you deal with that? Well, if they want to destroy you, you don't want to destroy them?
I do not. From my worldview, if I were to destroy a Muslim simply because he's Muslim, I have sealed his fate for all eternity. That's not a very loving and kind thing to do.
It's not very Christian.
Not exactly. So my responsibility is to present the never-changing gospel to an ever-changing culture in a way that makes sense to them, so that they can come to an understanding of what I believe to be true, so they can at least understand where I'm coming from and why, that they can evaluate that themselves to see whether it is true.
And so your concept of religious liberty applies to their liberty to feel like they need to destroy Christians. You're saying they have the religious right to hold that position. Is that what you're saying?
They have the religious right to, if they wish to believe that to be a true statement, yes, they can believe that to be a true statement, but in a free and open society, we are not allowed and not permitted to take away someone else's freedom and someone else's opportunities to make that same or come to that same conclusion. And that's why that's where the non-establishment clause would come in.
Okay, now we've just got a very short time left. You have another public event coming up, do you not?
Yes.
Would you like to tell our audience about that?
Please. Coming up on November 6 and 7, there's Equipped to Care. It'll be a conference on adoption and foster care. Bruce and Denise Kendrick, John Fuller will be speakers, along with former Louisiana Senator Mary Landrieu, talking about the value of adoption care and foster care, and it'll be at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. So that's coming up November 6 and 7.
I think the people in my organization will find that of genuine interest because, as you know, our position is that people should live full, rewarding lives so long as in doing so they don't prevent other people from doing the same thing.
Exactly.
So I think we can look forward to that, and I'm sure that you will do some public announcements in that respect.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you folks for being with us and watching our show, which can be seen not only on New Orleans Cox Cable, but on the internet through various sources. See you again. And Lloyd, thank you very much for being here.